On a bitter cold winter morning in Arlington, Texas, the familiar Vietnamese Pho restaurant, well known to locals, suddenly fell unusually silent. This scene surprised all passers-by, as for years, the restaurant's owner rarely closed even for a single day. However, hidden behind this silence was an unimaginable tragedy. The owner had been killed right in front of her own restaurant. What remained was only a body covered in wounds, a purse lying scattered on the sidewalk, and the shadow of an SUV hastily speeding away into the cold morning mist. Who could have committed such a brutal act? And why had this gentle woman become the target of such a horrific crime? Join Crime Documentary Files as we explore today's case. Around 10 a.m. on Friday, December 29, 2023, Arlington police received an urgent 911 call. The trembling voice on the other end described the horrifying scene they had just witnessed. Right outside the parking lot in front of the Vietnamese Pho restaurant, a woman was struggling violently with an unknown man. However, the call was suddenly cut short when the witness saw the attacker quickly jump into a car and speed away, leaving the woman motionless on the cold ground. Sensing the severity of the situation, the Arlington police team quickly arrived at the scene within minutes. The scene was a small shopping center located on the 6500 block of New York Avenue. When officers arrived, what appeared before them was the image of a middle-aged woman lying unconscious next to the parking area. The surrounding atmosphere was tense and confused. Local residents still didn't understand what had happened, while employees from nearby stores began to gather, watching from afar with worried and shocked expressions. After careful examination, police confirmed the worst. The woman showed no signs of life. Her body lay face up on the hard ground, right next to a car with its door still wide open. The victim was estimated to be in her 50s, an Asian woman dressed simply as if she had been going to work. The woman's head area suffered severe trauma, with blood soaking through her hair. The victim's body still bore faint tire marks, while the concrete pavement around showed deep scratches and streaks of blood. Particularly notable were the black rubber marks from tires imprinted on the concrete surface, like silent evidence of a violent collision. Based on these clear clues, police quickly reached an initial assessment. The victim had very likely been run over by a vehicle. The scene around the crime site showed the chaos of those final moments. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere: a metal keychain, some loose bills fallen from a wallet, and cell phones with cracked screens lying several feet away. However, the most notable detail was that the victim's purse had disappeared. Only a broken strap lay nearby. This important clue immediately led investigators to consider a hypothesis. This could have been a bold robbery that escalated to murder. However, when thoroughly checking on site, police were surprised to discover that the victim's coat pocket still contained a considerable amount of cash. This discovery opened up an entirely new line of speculation. Had the victim just made a withdrawal transaction at a bank, or was she planning to take this money somewhere? Whatever the initial motive, the attackers' oversight of this cash suggested their actions occurred in haste and panic, very likely only managing to grab the purse before hurriedly fleeing the scene. The rapid response team immediately cordoned off the scene, beginning a meticulous search for any possible clues. Even at a glance, anyone could sense that this was a woman with a kind face. Now she had passed away suddenly and tragically, leaving countless questions. Who was this cruel killer? And for what reason had she become their target? The backdrop of this tragedy was the parking lot right in front of Son Nam Restaurant, a Vietnamese restaurant located in a strip of small stores on New York Avenue. On that fateful morning, the restaurant had not yet officially opened for customers. The folding chairs outside were still dotted with morning dew, while the window glass reflected dim light from neon signs that hadn't been fully turned off, all creating a quiet scene before the tragedy struck. While the forensic team focused on collecting important evidence, from tire marks to footprints at the scene, detectives quickly deployed throughout the area to interview local residents. However, the only direct witness they could find could only provide very limited information. This person recounted that from a distance, they could only vaguely see the image of a tall man having a violent altercation with the victim, then quickly jumping into a car and speeding away. The entire incident happened in a flash, preventing the witness from timely recording the license plate or clearly identifying the perpetrator's facial features. The only thing they could confirm was that the attacker was driving a white SUV, very likely a Dodge Durango or similar models. In the crucial first hours after the crime occurred, the most urgent task for police was to identify this unfortunate woman. However, what seemed like a simple task became a major challenge when all items that could help identify the victim, from identification documents to wallets and phones, had all disappeared with the stolen purse. Just when desperation set in, an officer noticed a small but extremely important detail: a keychain lying near the body. Upon closer inspection, they discovered a small plastic tag with a restaurant logo attached to the keyring. Flipping over the tag, the words Pho Son Nam, Arlington, Texas, appeared clearly like a ray of hope in the investigation process. This breakthrough clue immediately led police to conclude the victim very likely had a close connection to Son Nam Pho restaurant, possibly an employee or even the owner of this Vietnamese restaurant, which ironically was located right in front of the crime scene just a few steps away. The coincidence of location led to a reasonable hypothesis. Could the victim have been the person assigned to open the restaurant that early morning? This hypothesis was reinforced by many convincing details. The victim was dressed simply, appropriate for going to work early, and particularly, her coat pocket still contained a considerable amount of cash, very likely money set aside for making change for business or for depositing the previous day's revenue. All these signs pointed in one direction. This was not a random robbery, but very likely the perpetrator knew about the victim's habits and schedule. To verify this hypothesis, police quickly contacted the restaurant owner. Just minutes later, a middle-aged man named Daniel rushed to the scene with a worried expression. The defining moment came when he saw the motionless woman. Time seemed to stop as he stood frozen with eyes that couldn't believe what they saw. It was his beloved wife whom he had spoken with just hours before. Now, the victim's identity was finally revealed. Mrs. Tho Mai Tu, 56 years old, someone the surrounding community knew and affectionately called Mrs. Kim. The identification process was carried out with cooperation between the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office through fingerprint examination, personal record comparison, and painful confirmation from Mrs. Tu's family. When the tragic news began to spread throughout the community, a wave of shock and grief engulfed the entire area. The belief that the familiar Pho restaurant owner, who always smiled when welcoming everyone, had passed away tragically right at the threshold of the restaurant she had devoted her heart to building was something no one could accept. Mrs. Kim's life story was the typical journey of a Vietnamese immigrant with American dreams. Family revealed that she had immigrated from her homeland Vietnam to America decades ago, bringing with her dreams of building a better new life. Many years ago, with hard work and passionate dedication, she and her husband built Son Nam Pho restaurant on New York Avenue in Arlington. From a small shop initially, the restaurant gradually became an essential culinary destination for the Vietnamese community in Texas and local diners who loved traditional Pho Cho. What customers remembered about Mrs. Kim wasn't just her cooking skills, but also how she welcomed everyone. Although her English wasn't perfect, her warm smile and greetings in broken English mixed with familiar Vietnamese words created an intimate atmosphere. Mrs. Kim's personal life was also filled with happiness, with a large, warm family. Children and grandchildren always gathered around, creating the harmonious scene that anyone would desire. Jennifer Tu, one of Mrs. Kim's daughters, emotionally shared about her wonderful mother. "My mother was an extremely caring and kind woman. She always put family and everyone around her first, even caring about others more than herself. Not only loved by family, Mrs. Kim was also respected and cherished by the entire community for her gentle nature and willingness to help others. She regularly contributed free meals for local church charity events, actively participating in fundraisers to support fellow countrymen facing difficulties in life. To everyone around her, Mrs. Kim was someone who lived wholeheartedly for her family and those around her, not the type of person who could create hatred or conflicts. When investigators looked into Mrs. Kim's planned schedule for that fateful morning, a clear picture gradually emerged. Both family members and restaurant employees confirmed that she planned to stop by Restaurant Depot in Fort Worth, a wholesale food center specializing in serving restaurants, to buy necessary ingredients for daily business. After completing her shopping, she would return to the restaurant to prepare for opening as usual. Her carrying a considerable amount of cash in her coat pocket could have been money set aside for paying for goods or change prepared to serve customers during the day. All clues at the scene perfectly matched this schedule. She wore warm clothing appropriate for the cold morning weather, had cash in her pocket as mentioned, the car, and had several small boxes in her car, signs showing she had completed part of her shopping work. When piecing the information together, a clear travel route was reconstructed. Mrs. Kim left her home early in the morning, traveled to several locations to pick up goods, and finally returned to the restaurant around 10 a.m. However, this detailed information raised a serious question for investigation experts. Could this have been a random attack? If Mrs. Kim had traveled to many different locations throughout the morning, then it was very likely that the perpetrator had secretly followed and tracked her from some point before deciding to strike. Perhaps he had spotted her at the bank when she made a transaction, or at the store when she was shopping, then patiently followed her until finding the right opportunity to attack. This scenario seemed much more reasonable than the hypothesis of a completely random robbery occurring just as she parked in front of her own restaurant. In the early days of investigation, there were quite a few rumors and unverified information circulating, including that Mrs. Kim was said to have stopped at a bank to withdraw money before returning to the restaurant. However, after several weeks of thorough investigation, police officially corrected this information decisively. Mrs. Kim had absolutely not stopped at any bank that morning. Through reviewing all financial transactions and security cameras from banks in the area, investigators confirmed that all of her shopping activities only took place at retail stores, and there was no evidence that the victim had made any cash withdrawal transactions. Excluding the bank factor not only didn't simplify the case, but made it more mysterious and complex than ever. If Mrs. Kim wasn't targeted when leaving the bank with a large amount of money, then what had attracted the perpetrator's attention to her? Could this have been a completely random attack in the parking lot? Or did the attacker have some inside information about her regularly carrying cash? These key questions still haven't found satisfactory answers, but excluding the bank from the list of suspicious locations helped the investigation team focus resources on thoroughly examining the places Mrs. Kim had actually visited during her final journey. Through interviewing family and friends, police learned that Mrs. Kim was a woman who lived peacefully, having no personal conflicts or disputes with anyone that could lead to such brutal behavior. All acquaintances confirmed that she had no enemies, wasn't involved in complex financial issues or tense relationships. With this information, the case gradually leaned toward being a robbery with an unexpected and opportunistic nature rather than a planned revenge. In this context, identifying the perpetrator became a challenge, requiring special persistence and talent. The mysterious white SUV, the only vehicle the witness could describe, now became the key and only clue in the investigators' hands. Right on the morning of December 29, 2023, the investigation team urgently deployed efforts to collect evidence from surveillance camera systems throughout the area. In a fortunate development for the investigation, right next to Sun Nam Pho restaurant was a daycare center that had installed a security camera system with angles covering the entire parking lot. Recognizing the importance of this clue, investigators quickly contacted the center's management to request permission to extract all video data during the critical time period around the crime. The video from the security camera captured extremely valuable images. Just minutes before the first police force arrived at the scene, a white SUV suddenly appeared in the camera frame, moving suspiciously. After thorough analysis of the video, experts identified it as a relatively new white Dodge Durango, moving at an unusually slow speed behind the row of stores right at the time of the altercation between the perpetrator and victim. Although the image quality from the camera wasn't clear enough to identify the license plate or the attacker's face, the vehicle's identifying characteristics were accurately recorded. This Dodge Durango had a fairly simple appearance with plain white paint. Arlington police utilized the traffic camera system and automatic license plate readers placed on main roads. By reviewing data from morning to afternoon on December 29th, they hoped to find the white SUV fleeing. And indeed, not long after, cameras near the scene recorded a white Dodge Durango leaving the area right after the crime occurred. Notably, the camera captured the license plate. It was a Texas plate. Investigators anxiously looked up which vehicle this license plate belonged to, but when checking the database, police were surprised to discover that the Texas plate used by the white SUV was registered to a completely different vehicle. Specifically, that plate belonged to a customer who had rented a car from Enterprise, and that vehicle had been returned before the crime occurred. In other words, the perpetrator may have used fake or stolen plates. This discovered vehicle immediately made the case more serious because it showed the perpetrator had very sophisticated and meticulous preparation to conceal the vehicle's identity. However, this SUV remained the most important clue at the time, so the investigation team decided to stick with this vehicle to track down the perpetrator. They split into two directions. One worked with Enterprise Rental Company to find the SUV's origin, suspecting this might be a rental car. The other continued exploiting the automatic license plate reader network to track the SUV's journey. From Enterprise data, detectives identified that the Texas plate originally belonged to a Dodge Durango rented in Dallas by a male customer temporarily called A. This Mr. A had rented this car earlier, but on the morning of December 29th, when he discovered the rear license plate was missing, he immediately reported it to the company and returned the car at 11 a.m. on December 29th. This information was extremely valuable because it confirmed that the license plate was stolen purposefully, not by chance, and the time it went missing was the night of December 28th or early morning December 29th. Furthermore, Mr. A's Durango being returned to the company at 11 a.m. on December 29th meant that right after the crime occurred, the rental car returned to Enterprise while the stolen plate was attached to the perpetrator's SUV circulating somewhere. And indeed, data from cameras showed that after Mr. A returned the car at 11 a.m. on December 29th, there were still instances of vehicles using that plate appearing on roads. This was clearly the perpetrator's SUV running with the stolen plate. Thanks to the camera network, police gradually reconstructed the killer's escape route. The SUV left Arlington after the crime, traveling through neighboring counties in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. By December 30th around noon, cameras in Irving recorded the last time the SUV used the fake Texas plate, after which this plate completely disappeared from the system. Most likely the perpetrator had removed the stolen plate. And indeed, just hours later on the afternoon of December 30th around 5 p.m., another camera in Houston, about 250 miles from Irving, spotted a white Dodge Durango with Louisiana plates. Comparing images from Houston cameras with previous photos from the scene, technicians noticed unique matching points from the car's year and style to a small dent in the right rear fender. Everything was identical. This coincidence made police unable to ignore it. They concluded that the perpetrator had likely driven back to the Houston area of South Texas the next day while reattaching the vehicle's original plates. Another valuable detail also emerged. Security cameras at Restaurant Depot in East Fort Worth, where Mrs. Kim shopped before being murdered, also recorded images of a man driving a white Dodge Durango following her in the store's parking lot. The investigation team enlarged the images and recognized a rectangular decal stuck on the windshield of the SUV was the type only found on vehicles registered in Louisiana. This was convincing evidence that this vehicle originally carried Louisiana plates, not Texas. In other words, the criminal used the tactic of swapping license plates, hoping to fool police when committing crimes in the Texas area. By this point, the crime picture was becoming clear. The perpetrator was connected to Houston in South Texas, but used a rental car with Louisiana plates. He drove up to North Texas, stole a Texas plate to attach for local vehicle disguise, then after committing the crime returned to Houston and removed the fake plates. This sophisticated plan almost misled the investigation, but thanks to modern camera systems, Arlington police were still able to follow his trail. In early January 2024, knowing the SUV was a rental, the investigation team shifted focus to concentrate on the rental contract for the Louisiana-plated Dodge Durango. They cooperated with Enterprise's Houston branch and quickly found a white Louisiana-plated Durango rented on the morning of December 28, 2023, at an Enterprise location in Houston. The person named on the rental contract was a young black woman temporarily called B. The initial rental period was only a few days, but by early January 2024, it still hadn't been returned. This information led investigators to suspect whether this woman was connected to the perpetrator. Digging deeper, they discovered B and a related person in Houston had a relationship with someone named Fernando Taylor, 35 years old, black male. This name became prominent for a very special reason. Taylor had been arrested in 2019, along with 5 other accomplices for carrying out a series of tracking robberies, that is, stalking and following victims from banks then conducting armed robberies. He also had a history of using fake license plates to avoid police tracking. Records showed Fernando Taylor had just completed his federal prison sentence on December 21, 2023, just 18 days before the murder occurred in Arlington. The coincidence in timing and crime methods immediately made detectives suspect Taylor was behind the robbery and attack on Mrs. Kim. Additionally, when police preliminarily interviewed B's friends, they all said B had lent the SUV to a friend nicknamed Pimp right after renting it, and Pimp was Taylor's nickname in Houston. By this point, police had the profile of suspect number 1, Fernando Taylor, someone with prior robbery convictions, recently released from prison, who had previously swapped license plates and knew the person who rented the related vehicle. However, all suspicions needed to be reinforced with authentic evidence, so Arlington police decided to send a detective team to Houston to coordinate investigation and secret surveillance. In Houston, the Arlington detective team cooperated closely with Houston Police Department's Crime Suppression Unit. They conducted surveillance of the area where Taylor lived at a suburban Houston address. Cameras there showed Taylor's personal vehicle, a Chevrolet Silverado, regularly coming and going from the house area. Conversely, the rented Dodge Durango with Louisiana plates also appeared multiple times in this area after December 30th. But from January 25th, it was no longer seen, possibly hidden or moved elsewhere. Recognizing the crucial importance of finding the SUV, the detective team decided to switch to direct search tactics for this vehicle to collect key forensic evidence. On January 24, 2024, after a long period of persistently following clues and searching each area, they discovered the suspicious Louisiana-plated Dodge Durango parked normally in an apartment complex parking lot in Houston. Instead of acting hastily, the task force carefully monitored the surrounding area. Their patient waiting strategy was rewarded near noon when a black woman stepped out and walked toward the car. Through identification, they confirmed this was B, the woman with important connections to the vehicle in the investigation. After B got in the car and began moving, the task force activated their plan to follow secretly and professionally. When B committed a minor traffic violation while driving, police conducted a traffic stop and asked B to pull over for routine traffic inspection, creating favorable conditions for approach and interview. B appeared worried, but still cooperated when police explained the reason. In the roadside interview, B confessed a series of important details. A friend nicknamed Pimp had persistently asked to borrow her car on December 28th, even having another friend call to persuade her, and finally B agreed to swap cars. She gave Pimp the newly rented Durango in exchange for him giving her another car to use temporarily. He said he would return the car after a day or two, and promised to give her $1,500 when he returned. And indeed, days later Pimp returned to Houston, gave back the Durango while giving B $1,500 cash to pay the overdue rental fees. B insisted she didn't know what Pimp did in Dallas, only heard him vaguely mention doing some big jobs, and told her not to ask too many questions. Most importantly, when police showed B a photo of Fernando Taylor, she immediately confirmed this person was indeed Pimp. Going further, investigators showed B images extracted from surveillance video. B glanced over and definitively stated that was Fernando Taylor. B's testimony became the key direct link confirming Taylor was the one who drove the SUV to commit the crime. Police immediately confiscated the Dodge Durango from B for forensic examination. By the end of January 2024, an arrest warrant for murder charges was approved by Tarrant County Court for Fernando Taylor. On January 26, 2024, Houston police cooperated with federal forces to surround a house in North Houston where Taylor was believed to be hiding. The operation proceeded suddenly and swiftly. Fernando Taylor was arrested without any significant resistance. When handcuffed, he was quite calm, perhaps not expecting to be discovered in less than a month. After nearly a month of living in anxiety and worry, the Vietnamese community in Arlington could finally breathe somewhat easier upon receiving news that the perpetrator had been arrested and could no longer pose a danger to society. However, inside the interrogation rooms at Harris County Jail in Houston, Fernando Taylor displayed an attitude completely opposite to investigators' expectations. He appeared extremely quiet, firmly refusing to answer any questions related to the real motive behind tracking and attacking Mrs. Kim. To this point, the most basic and important questions remain unanswered. Why did Taylor attack Mrs. Kim? Did he target her beforehand with purpose, or was this just a completely random attack when he discovered she was carrying cash? Taylor's stubborn silence has left all these crucial questions still as unsolved mysteries. The Arlington investigation team faces major challenges in getting the suspect to speak, still hoping that someday Taylor will decide to reveal his thoughts, helping to fully clarify the truth of this shocking case. Whether Taylor continues to remain silent or not, one undeniable fact is that all collected evidence has built an extremely solid and convincing legal picture, all pointing directly at Fernando Taylor. He is the one who planned in detail to track Mrs. Kim, then committed the robbery leading to the victim's tragic death. In May 2024, the Tarrant County Grand Jury officially approved the indictment charging Fernando Taylor with serious crimes. However, as usual with complex murder cases, the legal litigation process often requires a long period to complete, and this case is no exception. To this point, the case hasn't yet gone to formal trial due to needing more time to collect remaining evidence, conduct detailed forensic examinations, and complete complex legal procedures necessary in the pre-trial phase. Fernando Taylor is currently being held at Tarrant County Jail without bail due to the particularly serious nature of the crime he's accused of. He continues to exercise his right to remain silent, guaranteed by law, not yet making any confession or public defense statements. According to legal experts' predictions, it's very likely the defense team will advise their client not to plead guilty, meaning the case will have to go to public trial. If the trial proceeds smoothly and Taylor is convicted, justice will be fully served. However, the trial will also be the first and possibly only opportunity for the public to directly hear words from the killer's own mouth about the case that shook the entire community. Will Fernando Taylor express remorse for what he caused, or will he continue to maintain the cold, stubborn attitude he's shown throughout this time? The answers to these questions remain mysteries belonging to the future. What do you think was the motive for this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.